All right, so first thing we want to talk about, your Moodle assignment number 2 is about how cells got started. Where did they come from? All the cells on the earth today, we're going to be able to divide into 2 big categories. Somebody tell me what those 2 categories are. Yes. Exactly. Prokaryote and eukaryote. Joy, what things on earth today have prokaryotic cells?
Bacteria.
Only bacteria. Alex, what has eukaryotic cells?
Let's see.
Yeah, which is?
Almost everything.
Everything else, right? Just bacteria, that's it, here. Only bacteria. There's different kinds of bacteria. There's what are called eubacteria and archaebacteria. We'll get into those later. But bacteria in general. The root word here, prokaryote. I want to focus on the karyo part first. Literally comes from a root that means kernel. But in biology, it's been co-opted to mean what? Nucleus. When we see that karyo root, you want to think about nucleus. You're going to see that word a lot in this class, that root. No, when you see that, it's talking about DNA, chromosomes, nucleus. The pro part of this word, so is a prefix that gets used a lot, just in normal English. It means what? Before. Before the nucleus. And the EU part is another thing that's going to show up quite a bit in this class. That means true. So before the nucleus, true nucleus. That leads us into some ideas that we need to make sure we understand. According to scientists, and you'll read a lot about this in your Moodle assignment, the first cells on Earth were bacteria-like cells, prokaryotes. You can't really say that prokaryotic cells are simple, but they're not quite as complicated as eukaryotic cells. Let's talk about some characteristics of prokaryotic cells. First of all, we said it's only bacteria. Those are the only things on Earth today with prokaryotic cells, just bacteria, in all their different forms and types. We already mentioned that the term means before the nucleus. Because they don't have a nucleus, does that mean they don't have DNA? Do bacteria have DNA? Yeah. What do you have to have DNA for? What's its essential function? What's really the only thing DNA does in your body? Speak up so everybody hears you. You're right. Tell them how to make proteins. It tells them what proteins to make and how to make them. And at first that might not seem all that important. But 70-something% of your body and of your cells is made out of what? You know? 70-something% is made out of water. That other 30% is mostly what? Proteins. Those are the pieces that make you work. By far, what are the most important proteins in your body? The proteins that make you actually do what you do. The proteins that make your chemistry work. What are those proteins called as a group? Somebody can answer that. Proteins that make chemical reactions start and keep going. We talked about one the other day in class as an example. We talked about amylase in the mouth. It's an enzyme. Okay? So by controlling proteins, your DNA not only controls the structure of your body, things like muscle and hair and skin and even parts of your bone, it also controls the pieces of your body that make things happen, your enzymes. It's really, really important. Bacteria have DNA. They don't have nearly as much as we have. Notice what it says up here. They have a single looped chromosome. It's not really a circle, but it's circular. It's looped. Just one. Why do bacteria not need a whole lot of DNA? How many chromosomes do you have in every cell? 46. Except for which cells? Except for your sex, that's your gametes, sperm and your eggs, and those have how many? 23 apiece. Bacteria have way less DNA because they're way less what? they're way less complicated. I mean, they can't do as much stuff, right? If you can't do as much stuff, do you need as many proteins? Probably not. Their piece of DNA is just sort of floating out in the cell. It's not separated from the rest of the cell. That's what makes a nucleus be a nucleus, is that the DNA is enclosed. It's like in its own little room. What encloses it? Figure? Yeah, but what actually makes up the enclosure? Yeah, it's made of a membrane, much like the cell membrane. So it's got a cell membrane on the outside and then a nuclear membrane around the DNA. It's separated from everything. And that leads me to next big point, that another thing that bacteria don't have, says they lack, actually, that's not what, I need one more thing up there. They lack what else that your cells have? What do bacteria not have that you do? It's the other big thing they're missing that eukaryotic cells have. Organelles. And let's put it this way. Membrane-bound organelles. So make sure you put that down in your notes. That bacteria lack membrane-bound organelles. This is an important point. You have all these organelles, things, somebody name an organelle. Ribosomes are technically not an organelle, at least not a membrane-bound organelle, because they're just like solid lumps of stuff. Golgi apparatus. Name another. It's mitochondria. Keep going. What's one in plants that you don't have? Chloroplasts. Lysosomes. Endoplasmic reticulum. There's a lot of them. In your cells, you have all these separate pieces inside each cell. They're like in separate containers. They're like separate, think of them sort of like separate rooms in the cell, being like a house. What does that let your cells do that bacteria don't do very well? Since your cells are divided into specific parts. Think of it this way. What's Henry Ford maybe maybe not most famous for, but maybe what was Henry Ford's most important contribution to society? Say again? The assembly line. Anybody ever been to an assembly line? In a factory, each person on that assembly line has one thing they do, right? In college, I worked, you get like a month off for college, for Christmas. And every Christmas, I would get a different job just to make some money to spend while I was in college. I'd go to like a temporary agency and they would just hire me out to different places. One Christmas, I got hired on at the Gold Star TV factory, which used to be out near the airport. And my job for 4 weeks, I was on an assembly line, and I was near the end of the line where they made the TVs, and I would hit a button, and the TV would come up to me, it was finished, it was already put together, and my job was to dust the TV before it got put into the bag in the box. I dusted TVs all day, every day, for 4 weeks. Point being, though, in an assembly line, what happens to you since you're only doing that one job? You become really good at doing that one job. I was an amazing TV duster at the end of 4 weeks. I was awesome at it. Your cells work much the same way. You've got these separate pieces, so they become what? Specialized. The mitochondria is all about doing what? Say again? No, not mitochondria. Making ATP, and it becomes really good at that. The chloroplasts become really good at doing photosynthesis. The Golgi apparatus becomes really good at packing things and modifying proteins. What that allows your body to do, though, is it allows your body to become much more efficient. You've got pieces that specialize, the work gets divided up between all these pieces, and the efficiency of your cell becomes much greater. Let's say that we were all going to build a car. Joy up here is a bacteria. She's going to build a car by herself from scratch. She's got metal and rubber. She's going to build a car. We, the rest of us, are a cell. We're going to build the car as a unit. Whose car would you buy if you were buying a car? Would you buy a car from us, the collective, or from Joy? Whose car is probably going to be better? Ours is probably going to be better. Because each one of us, if we build a lot of cars, we're going to be good at what we're doing. Maybe Matt over there becomes really good at building engines. And maybe Jordan becomes really good at wiring up the car. And maybe Colin here becomes good at putting on the wheels and making the wheels. We become specialized. We become good at a specific function. Joy, on the other hand, has to do what? She has to do everything. So she's kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of what? Nothing. So her car is just probably going to be kind of average, right? So it's going to be already great. But she's not going to be really good at anything. She's going to be sort of good at everything. That's kind of like a bacteria. It's kind of like a prokaryote cell. It has to do everything in one. It's not going to be nearly as specialized. It's not going to be nearly as efficient as a eukaryotic kind of cell would be. So make sure you note in your notes, not only do bacteria lack a membrane-bound nucleus, they also lack all those membrane-bound organelles that we just talked about. They do have ribosomes. Every cell has to have these structures called ribosomes. They're not technically considered organelles, at least not membrane-bound organelles. What do ribosomes do? They make the protein. So the DNA is like the directions. Build this protein, here's how you build it. The ribosomes are like the workers that actually put it together. And we'll get into how that works. Every cell's got to have ribosomes. Bacterial ribosomes are a little bit different than eukaryotic ribosomes. Scientists can tell them apart. But they do the same basic function. They put together proteins based on directions from DNA or RNA. Also, another thing that every cell has to have, regardless of type, is a membrane. It's made out of lipids, phospholipids. What's the job of your cell membrane? Regardless of what kind of cell you are, bacteria, protist, fungus, plant, animal, what's the job of the cell membrane? Yeah, it regulates. And that's a word we're going to talk about over and over again, regulation. That's one of those themes up there on the board, regulations, especially like in idea number 2 and also in big idea number 4. We're going to talk a lot about regulation. How do cells, how do organisms regulate internal kinds of things? That's one of the things the cell membrane does. What kinds of things can go in and out of a cell membrane without much problem? Just kind of any time it needs to go in and out, it just zips right through. What kinds of things can do that? Get in and out of the cell easily. What about water lets it do that? Water's right. Water can go in and out pretty much when it needs to. One thing that makes it really easy for things to get in and out is size. How many atoms make up a water molecule? 3. It's really tiny, right? Tiny things get in and out pretty easily most of the time. There's some things that make that not possible. Small things can get through. Bigger things, like a protein, is this huge molecule. Not so much, you can't get through very easily. What else might make it easy for something to get through a cell? Other than size. That's something you might not know so much about. Charge, or what's called polarity. You think your cell membrane is mostly charged or mostly uncharged? Mostly polar or mostly non-polar? What do you think? You might take a shot at it. It's 50-50. It's mostly non-polar. Which means, do you think charged things can go through it, or uncharged things can go through it easiest? Mostly uncharged. Non-polar and non-polar go together. Polar and polar go together. Polar and non-polar don't go together. Where do you see that on a regular basis in your normal life? Say again? That's polar. That's kind of a different polar than we're talking about here. But at home in the kitchen, where do you see that polar and non-polar don't go together? Yeah, that's still not where I'm going though. Actual cooking stuff, where do you see it? Polar and non-polar not mixing. Oil and water. Grease and water, right? They separate. Water is a polar molecule. Water is charged. Oil is essentially not charged. So when you put them together, what do they do to each other? They don't want to be around each other. So things that are charged have a hard time getting into the cell. The cell has to have a special way to get them in. And we'll get into what that special way is later. But realize every cell has a phospholipid cell membrane. And that sort of brings me to another point that you're going to read about in this new assignment too. Regardless of the type of living thing, whether we're talking about bacteria, plant, animal, fungus, and anything in between, protists, there's some things that are pretty much identical in every living thing. DNA is basically the same chemical in every living thing. Certain enzymes are basically the same in almost every living thing. The cell membrane is almost exactly the same in every living thing. Cell respiration works basically the same way in most living things. What does scientists say that means? What does scientists say that's evidence for? That all these things are exactly the same in everything we've ever looked at. What do they say that must mean? They must have come from something that had those properties to begin with, right? So sometimes we call those conserved properties. Conserved meaning they're the same. No matter where you go, you find these same things. Scientists would argue that that might be the most powerful evidence that life has evolved, because these conserved properties that seem to be the same all over the place, regardless of what kind of life you live in. One thing about prokaryotic cells that we need to also mention is that prokaryotic cells have a wall. Where is the wall in relation to the membrane in any cell that has a wall? It's outside. What's the job of the wall? Not so much. It's not about keeping things out. It's not like the wall of China, protecting it from what mostly? What would be a problem if we took one of Joy's cells here and we stuck it in a cup of water, which is where a lot of things live, in water? What would happen to your cell if we just stuck it in pure water? It'd swell up because water goes in. Water goes from where there's more water to where there's less water, right? Higher concentration of water to lower concentration of water. And Joy's cells don't have any walls. So the water just keeps going in and going in and going in and going in. And what starts to build up inside that cell? As more water goes in, what builds up in the cell? Pressure, turgor pressure. And eventually, since her cell doesn't have a wall, what happens? It explodes. Pressure pops it. But things that are exposed to a lot of fresh water, like plant cells, like bacterial cells, they have a wall. So eventually, when enough pressure builds up, that wall is on the outside. It's hard. It's stiff. The cell's not going to pop. What's going to stop happening because that wall is there? What's the wall going to stop from happening? It's not only going to stop the pop, it's going to eventually stop the water from being able to get in there, right? Because the pressure is going to push it back the other way. So that's one of the main things the wall's there for, is to keep it from popping, to protect it from too much water. And then in some things it's also there for structure, like a plant. That's what makes a plant stand up, right, or a wall. It has different functions. But realize that bacterial cells have a wall. It's mostly about protecting it from bursting from water. All right, last couple things. Let's talk about eukaryotes for a second. Kind of contrast prokaryote and eukaryote. We already talked about that eukaryotes have a true nucleus. It's enclosed. That's what makes it be a true nucleus. It's separated from the rest of the cell by a membrane. And these eukaryotic cells typically have several chromosomes per cell. We already said how many do you guys have per cell? 46. Are those the same in every cell in your body? You have the same 46 chromosomes in every cell? Where did those 46 come from? 23 from your mom, 23 from your dad. Your original cell, your zygote, had 46, right? Every cell in your body should have the same 46. That leads me to another question. A little bit off topic, but a good question for you to be thinking about. Every cell in your body has the same exact DNA, with some minor exceptions. Why doesn't every cell look the same? A skin cell and a cell in your stomach or a nerve cell look very, very different. How? Any ideas? Different cells in different parts of your body look very different, although identical, they're genetically identical. What makes them look different? Somebody think. Step out and take a guess. Okay. What makes them do that? Your chromosomes are big chains of genes, right? Each gene tells you to make a certain protein or a certain trait. Because every cell has every chromosome, does that necessarily mean that every gene on every chromosome is working in every cell that has it? Think of genes like light switches. Sometimes those switches are on. Some places they're on. Other places they're off. Even though the genes are there, they're not always working. So that lets our cells become different in different parts of the body. Some genes are turned on in your stomach, others are turned on in your skin. And that lets those cells look different, act different, do different things. Hey.
Can you check out some of my food stuff? If I could do that.
Yeah. Who are you working with?
Hayden and Lonnie.
Just put it on my keyboard, and they're coming in the next block. Right?
Yes, they will be here.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
getting out here. Yep. You need me to initial your checkout slip, or have you got anything?
No.
You good? Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. All right, so key thing. Eukaryotic cells have multiple chromosomes. They're not typically linked like bacterial chromosomes. We oftentimes say eukaryotic chromosomes are linear. They're not really a straight line, but they're not in the loop. What shape do you normally think of when you hear chromosome? Say again? Yeah, you've heard X and Y because those are sex chromosomes. But most people normally think of a chromosome being an X. We'll get to mitosis here pretty soon, and this is something you should have talked about in your ninth grade biology class. Really, what is that X? So, when you see an X and somebody calls that a chromosome, really, what are you looking at? You're really looking at two copies of the same chromosome, right? Because when chromosomes become visible, what's already happened to them by the time we can see them? Hey, come on in. Yeah, you know where it's at, right? Probably have to go in that other door, and that key will get you in those doors. What you're looking at is two copies of the same chromosome. Before the chromosome becomes visible, the DNA has already been copied. What's going to happen to that X during cell division? It's going to split. And one of the new cells is going to get one arm of it, and one's going to get the other arm. And eventually, all the cells are going to end up with 46 chromosomes that are not going to be X-shaped. They're going to be like line-shaped, right? Half an X. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. It's not a perfect straight line, but our chromosomes are not looped like bacteria. Finish up before the bell rings here real quick on this slide. All cells have a cell membrane, including eukaryotes, made of the same stuff as the bacterial ones, phospholipids. Our cells have organelles. And let's make sure that we put membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cells have membrane-bound organelles. That's a short list of just a few of them. Thank you. We already talked about the advantage of having organelles, that it allows our cell parts to become specialized and become really good at doing a certain job, a certain thing. And that leads our overall cell to be much more efficient. It's all about division of the labor and specialization. Divide up the work. You become really good at this. You become really good at this. You become really good at this. And it will become better overall because of that. Examples of eukaryotic organisms are everything except bacteria. All these major things, Take a few things that aren't
Portion.
listed there.
Reminder seniors, the University of Alabama recruiter will be in the multipurpose room during break today. Please stop by and see her.
Last point, and then I'll shut up and we'll get ready to go. In terms of size of cells, who has bigger cells, prokaryotic or eukaryotic? Eukaryotic cells are way bigger than prokaryotic cells. It's hard to even see a prokaryotic cell with a normal light microscope. You got to really know what you're doing to be able to find them. You actually oftentimes have to use a special objective that works with oil to help get more light in there to see. It's hard to see the timing. Ask you this. Are there any human cells that you can see with your eye without a microscope? Single cells. Are there any human cells that you can see one cell by itself without a microscope? What do you think? Turns out there are. And I'm going to leave you with that question. I want you to think about this between next time. What kind of cell? There's only one that I know of. Some of you have them, some of you don't, that you can see without a microscope. And why would that cell need to be so big?